You know me as the host of the Too Busy to Eat show, but I'm also founder and CEO of Too Busy to Eat, the protein bar company. I make what I feel is the healthiest and best tasting protein bar on the market. So now it developed from my own frustration of not being able to find a bar that tasted good and that was extremely healthy, that I could have maybe multiple times a day if I was really busy, or I could feed my kids and not feel guilty about what they ate. So I created this bar with grass-fed whey protein, no more than 3 grams of sugar, which is all naturally occurring, and it's gluten-free, non-GMO, the list goes on. So don't take my word for it. I want you to try them. And I want to give you incentive to try them. So I'm going to give you 20% off your first order. You can get a sample bag of bars, or you can get a whole box, whatever you want. Go to my website, toobusytoeat.com. Not hard to remember. Show, the company. And enter the promo code TBTE show. TBTE show. Actually, it's a discount box when you check out, and you'll get 20% off your first order, no matter how small or large. So go to the website now, try them out, and then let me know what you think. Welcome to Too Busy to Eat. Today we have Todd White on the show. He is the founder of Dry Farm Wines. And not only that, he is a complete biohacker who is just fine-tuned his body through trial and error of a whole bunch of different sorts. But his company is absolutely amazing. The wines, they assemble basically the healthiest wines on this planet, and they ship them to your doorstep. So it's a fascinating interview. He will give you insights in all kinds of things, and really, he's going to give you a lot of information on wine itself. So without further delay, let's get to Todd. Well, welcome, Todd. I'm so excited. I'm excited to interview you for personal reasons, but I know everybody else is going to enjoy it. But, I really thank you for taking the time. I know you're traveling. Thank you for being on the show.
Hey, I'm just happy to be here. I can't wait to share a few nuggets of my learnings with your listeners today.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great because our pre-talk, we realize we have a lot in common, and people that listen to this show are going to be just fed just a world of knowledge. I mean, we got Dry Farm Wines, and you are an expert in the wine area of healthy wine, but you have so much other knowledge. So we're going to see what we get. But I do want to get to the fact that I gave a brief overview, but give us a little bit of the journey of where you've gone through this journey to get to where you are today. Why don't you give us a little overview of that?
Well, just quickly. So, on the wine thing, it was really a matter of becoming ketogenic about 3 years ago. And as I dialed in my nutritional programming, I just found that I just couldn't drink traditional wines anymore. I didn't really know what was going on. I'd been in the wine business for a long time. So I started biohacking wine and sort of taking it apart and deconstructing it. So that was kind of part of my journey, but dialing it way back from there in the 80s, I'd started low carb Atkins program, which, was just way ahead of its time, very controversial at the time. I had been doing low carb for many years. And then finally, as to break through a weight loss plateau some years ago, I started experimenting with a ketogenic diet. Right. And that's sort of what led me down this path. As for the wines, we sell and drink and recommend that people drink what's called natural wines. You would think, well, all wines are natural, but in fact, they're not.
Right.
And there are only about 500 winemakers in the world. We're the largest reseller in the world of natural wines. Okay. We have a large online wine club, health enthusiasts like you and I, right, who care about what they put in their body. Yeah. But just real quickly to explain to you what a natural wine is and why most wines are not natural. You would think that all wines are natural, but let me tell you why you don't know some of the following facts. Right. There are 76 additives approved by the FDA for the use in winemaking, 76. 38 of those include the acronym GRAS, which stands for Generally Regarded as Safe from the FDA. Now, here's the reason your listeners don't know about these additives. The wine industry, in collaboration with the government and tens of millions of dollars of lobbying money, have kept contents and nutritional labels off of wine.
Yep.
Now, Now, here's why they spend all that money and collaborate with their friends at the government to trick you, is because there's a bunch of chemicals and additives in every wine that they don't want you to know about, right? The contents label will look like this, right?
Yeah.
With a whole bunch of chemical names you couldn't pronounce. Well, they don't want you to know that. So that's the reason there's not a contents label. If it were just fermented grape juice, why would they care if there was a label on it?
Right.
But in fact, they fought to keep the labeling off of it. So our wines are all chemically free farmed, organic or biodynamic, irrigation free, another very big deal.
Wow.
None of our wines are irrigated. There are no domestic wine producers that make these wines. So all of our wines are imported from Europe.
All important.
There are only a few hundred farmers in the world, kind of activist, crazy, hippie farmers who make this natural product, right? So it's also low in alcohol, it's sugar-free, it's carb-free.
Wow.
And it's just a pure, whole, amazing product, right? That I stumbled upon. I didn't even know it existed. Nobody in the U.S. knows about it, right? And it's starting to get some mainstream press. Food and Wine Magazine, Bloomberg, New York Times covered it week before last. It's starting to get some mainstream press because there's a tremendous amount of interest among millennials, hippies, and health enthusiasts learning about it primarily through us. So that's kind of what natural wines do and how they're made and why they're very different and special. And the fact is you feel very different from drinking them. No hangover. And because there's no sugar, you don't get any of that sugar high and the kind of brain fog that comes along with that. So it's just a really awesome natural product.
So we talked about this before, but being on the ketogenic diet, the wine you drink, is there any kind of guidelines of being on a ketogenic diet of how much to drink and how often?
Well, you drink as much as you want. I drink a bottle a day. Dominic D'Agostino, who I think has been on your show, right?
He has. He's the man.
So Dr. Dom, who's kind of the king of keto these days and the leading ketogenic researcher in the United States, and a friend of ours has endorsed our product. He did extensive blood testing and experimentation with drinking our wines. I am blood quantified. I do blood testing, so I'm blood quantified ketogenic. Our wines have no impact. I don't care how much you drink because there's no sugar or carb in it. Right. I've been known to overindulge before. You can, what I call glorious exceptions. I generally recommend that people, or what we call microdose, or have moderate doses of alcohol, which is the reason that all of our wines are also, which we do independent lab testing on every wine. Right. The reason I mention that is because one of the things we test for is alcohol. All of our wines are 12.5% or below. Now, this is just another example of the conspiracy between your fine government, Uncle Sam, and the alcohol industry. Why do we have to test for alcohol? We also test for sugar and sulfites and toxins and mold and all kinds of things that we test for. But why would we test for alcohol? Isn't it on the bottle? Well, by law, my friends, what's stated on the bottle doesn't have to be accurate.
Oh, my gosh.
So this is, again, another collaboration between the wine industry and the government. Now there's a reason why it doesn't have to be accurate, because this law was written 50, 60 years ago when alcohol testing methods could have variation between laboratories. Now, that's no longer the case today. The methods are extremely accurate place to place. And so at one time, this may have been a good rule, but now, with alcohol testing and technology is so precise, there's no need to have this window. So by law, the wine can be up to 1.5% higher than what's stated on the label. So, but the alcohol industry doesn't want to change that, because what they do is they ramp up the alcohol and then they report that it's lower. Because then they get people more addicted, because alcohol is a domino drug. So here's the problem with drinking higher alcohol products. Alcohol draws you in. So the more you drink, the more perspective you lose and the more you're drawn into drinking more.
Right.
That's the reason it's very important from my perspective and as a drinking expert to drink an inherently lower alcohol product in the first place.
Right.
So that means either low alcohol wines, ciders, or beer. Well, beer is strictly out for a whole bunch of reasons. No reason to cover that.
Right.
Ciders are out, generally speaking, because they also contain too much sugar.
That's sugar. Yeah.
Now, there are some dry ciders in the market, and we've experimented with them and done lab testing on them. The problem is, once they become so dry that they meet our sugar-free requirements, they're almost undrinkable.
Yeah, right.
They're just so austere.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so wine is really, from my perspective, the only alcoholic beverage that meets both a low alcohol requirement.
Right.
Most of the wines I drink are 10 or 11%.
Okay.
We don't sell anything that exceeds 12.5.
Okay.
And so we think it's really important. I can drink a bottle of 11% wine and have, very insignificant impacts from it.
Right. Yeah. It's
what we want to use alcohol for is to get just an enhancement in euphoria and creative expression, a little lowering of that window of vulnerability. So this is particularly like, I only drink wine. I only recommend that people drink wine in the evening around the dinner table.
Right.
And when we're dining together and we have a little opening of vulnerability and some creative expansion, it just leads to, a more dynamic conversation.
Right.
And for you and I to know each other a little bit better than we might otherwise not be quite as open.
Right.
And that's how it's very beneficial. But when the dosage gets too high, it's just not as beneficial.
Right.
And it's certainly not as healthy.
Absolutely. Now, other than the lowering of our kind of inhibitions and opening us up a little bit more, what other have you discovered more the benefits to alcohol?
Well, I mean, there are all kinds of reported health benefits, all kinds of cardiovascular and also neurological benefits to moderate consumption of alcohol. And so that's been shown. There have been specific studies. There are about 1,000 polyphenols in red wine. The most famous one is called resveratrol.
Right. Okay.
However, some of that's a little bit of a red herring from the wine industry. There's not enough resveratrol in a bottle of wine to have any meaningful impact on your life.
Yeah.
You have to drink a boatload of red wine at a given sitting to get a dose high enough, based on what we've seen in lab animals or mice, to get a dose high enough of resveratrol. So I don't want to get too caught up in the in the health impacts of resveratrol. This is commonly done by the wine industry. It's a bit misleading.
Right.
However, here's what we do know. Wine, in our case, is about 88 or 89% water.
Okay.
It contains just over 1,000 polyphenols for red wines. And the rest is ethyl alcohol. Right. So most of wine is actually water.
Yeah.
But and then our wines are sugar-free. Sugar is another thing that we test for in wines. The problem with commercial wines today is that they're filled with sugar.
Absolutely.
Right? And as someone who's ketotic, I just don't eat sugar. I'm sugar-free, except as we talked about in the pre-show, except for those occasional rare 2 a.m. incidents.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a couple times a year. Yeah.
Well, a few times a year, I have been overserved at a party, having too much of that low alcohol wine. I end up in a hotel room. Next thing you know, I've got my hand over a cookie bar, or a candy bar or something.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often, but
once in a while. Yeah.
We all fall down. The trick is we just got to get back up and keep going and get right back on our program.
Absolutely.
When you're metabolically adapted on the ketogenic diet, if you do fall down occasionally, your recovery period is very quick, usually just a few hours.
Right. Which is just the benefit of sticking to it over time and getting all those health benefits. What's the difference? So I'm thinking this through. What's the big difference of the wines that you distribute? I mean, how are they processed differently to become sugar-free, low alcohol? What is the big difference there?
Well, that's just a wormhole question. I'm just trying to get. We have a really brief time.
I know.
A quick answer.
Yeah.
So it really begins with irrigation.
Okay.
And here's the problem with irrigation. Irrigation changes the physiology of how fruit ripens.
Right.
So common sense, you fill a piece of fruit up with water.
Okay.
Right. Then you have less flavor. Now, here's the reason that you irrigate, because fruit is sold by the ton.
Right.
Irrigating a grapevine is an American idea around profit.
Yes.
Right? Because you get a higher yield and the fruit weighs more, and since it's sold by the ton, that's why you irrigate.
Right.
Right. About money. It's not about health or quality.
Yeah.
But here's what happens when you irrigate a grapevine. The sugar level in the fruit has to get higher before it has proper flavor development, because it's got a lot of water in it.
Yep.
So you have higher sugar by the time you pick it. Now, here's why that's important. The amount of sugar in a berry at the time of picking determines the overall alcohol when it's finished fermenting.
Right.
Okay, here's why. Because yeast, when the fruit juice, which is filled with sugar,
Right.
is inoculated with yeast, the yeast eats the sugar, and the byproduct of that is carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol.
Right.
Now, the higher the sugar, the more there is for the yeast to eat, and the higher the outcome of the alcohol becomes. Now, that being said, in an unirrigated grapevine, in a properly farmed grapevine, the berries ripen with proper flavoring at lower sugar levels.
Right. Okay.
So you have lower sugar at picking, a more complex, a better character of quality of fruit, which has a denser flavor in the first place because it's not filled with water.
Right.
So it's a higher quality and a higher character fruit. So you've got lower sugar at picking. And then when the yeast eats the sugar, it finishes quicker. So consequently, you have less alcohol created.
Right.
Now, why wines are sugar-free, and this is probably the most common question that I'm asked, is how do you get sugar-free wine? It's very simple. When a wine is fully fermented and the yeast is allowed to eat all of the sugar, and you have a completed, fully fermented product, it's going to be sugar-free. Here's what happens in commercial wines. The winemaker uses sulfur dioxide to kill the yeast prior to it completing fermentation, leaving residual sugar behind. And they do that because the American palate, now a global palate, has become addicted and obsessed with sweet and sugar.
Yes.
Right? And so now you and I are not, and your listeners aren't, and my friends and colleagues are not, but we don't represent the buying public.
No.
I mean, we're a growing population for sure.
Absolutely.
But when you get off of this toxin, the white devil, I like to call it, the number one public health enemy, number one, all across the planet.
Right.
When you get off of this poison, you begin to feel, and I like to use the proverb, to feel is to understand.
Right.
You begin to feel how poisonous it is when you get away from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Got it. Well, that you handled that wormhole pretty dang good. I actually got a picture of what that is, and I understand the sugar-free thing. It was interesting to me. I mean, I even have a chemistry background, and I'm trying to think how are we getting so fascinating. Now, somebody that obviously, I'm going to say the number one thing anybody should do is go to Dry Farm Wines. But is there some somebody that's ketogenic, somebody that's just trying to get healthier, some tips that you can give to people that want to drink wine, but they can't do it because of their nutritional goals?
Right. I think there's a couple of pointers, if you will. Obviously, we're the only health quantified wine merchant in the world. Yeah. Right. So, and in addition to, as I mentioned earlier, not only are we working with specific farmers who are working inside of specific farming and winemaking protocols, but we do independent lab testing on every wine before it makes it in our portfolio. And we reject about 50% of the wines that we test on test results, even though they're naturally made. Right. Now,
and like you said, none in the United States too, correct?
So no, we represent no domestic producers.
Okay.
They just don't meet our criteria in one way or another.
Right. Right.
We'd love to represent domestic producers. They're just not here.
Right.
So that being said, here's a couple of things. So obviously, if you want to be clean and pure, you're going to buy wine from us.
Yes, that's number one.
But I'm not here to sell that idea. What I would tell you is that if you live in a major market, and there are only a handful, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, and New York are the big markets.
Right.
You would do an internet search and look for natural wines.
Okay.
And you'll find there'll be a natural wine bar, or maybe if you're in New York or you're in San Francisco or LA, there's going to be some natural wine merchants.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And so you would be able to go and meet with a wine merchant who is not health quantified. He doesn't do what we do, but he sells natural wines.
Right, right.
Now, they're not going to necessarily be low on alcohol. They're not going to necessarily be sugar-free. Just because a wine's naturally made doesn't make it sugar-free.
Right.
But you can at least get a head start there. Now, if you're in a restaurant and you want to order a bottle of wine, the best rule of thumb is to stay in France.
Okay.
Order a French wine.
Okay.
The key areas where you're going to find the most natural wines are going to be the Loire Valley or a Beaujolais.
Okay.
And third, certain Burgundies, and all Burgundies that are red are Pinot Noir.
Okay.
All white Burgundies are Chardonnay.
Okay.
So anyway, but stick with France or stick with any imported wine. Just, you're more likely to get a cleaner, fewer additives. Now, there are 56 additives approved for winemaking in the EU.
Okay.
So just because a wine is coming out of Europe doesn't make it natural or clean.
Right.
But what I'm telling you is that you're more likely, just because of the values of, what goes on in America.
Right.
Everything's bigger, bolder, richer, sweeter, more profitable.
Right.
It's what's happened in the wine business. Just quickly, what's happened in the wine business is exactly what's happened with Food Inc. and agribusiness. It's mass consolidation. Now, they don't want you to know that. So here's another little wine fact. 52% of all the wines made in the United States are made by just 3 giant companies.
Oh, my gosh.
Now, you don't know that. 70% of all the wines made in the U.S. are made by the top 30 companies.
Oh, my gosh.
Here's why you don't know that, because these guys are managing multi-billion-dollar portfolios, hiding behind thousands of labels and brands, because they want you to believe that you're drinking from a farmhouse or a chateau. When in fact, you're drinking from a massive factory.
Right.
What we call tank farms. These are farms of tanks as far as you can see. Right. And so that's how most of the wine in the United States is made.
Wow.
Because you've had this mass consolidation, and this is the same thing in Food Inc. and all of agribusiness. This is not about making you healthier, my friend. This is about profits,
making money,
speed, and less risk to the producer.
Right.
That's what this is all about. That's what's happened to everything. That's what's happened to our entire food supply. Which is super. I mean, this is the reason it's super important. If people want to be healthy, they've got to get outside of that food supply and take control of their destiny.
Right. That's shocking. I didn't. I mean, I've heard it in other avenues, but I didn't know that about the wine industry. That's fascinating. Now, most importantly, if people really want to take care of themselves, they need to get to dry farm wines. Give me an idea of what that looks like. What kind of service you provide? I mean, first of all, you already told us you screen everything. I mean, we know that whatever's coming from you is the best. So, what are some programs people can do to get wine from you?
Right. So we're an online wine club.
Okay.
We have 2 programs. We have 6 bottles and 12.
Okay.
They're $159 per delivery, shipping included on 6, and $299 on 12. That includes all shipping. That's really important because wine's heavy and it's expensive to ship. So the wines actually retail on average around $22 a bottle, which is a terrific value for a fine wine, handcrafted product. So we're an online wine club. You can get deliveries monthly or every other month, red, white, or mixed. we have thousands of customers across the U.S.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what that's kind of what our program looks like.
Yeah.
It's super simple. You can. We also do special offers throughout the year. So if you don't want to subscribe, if you just go to our website and sign up for our mail list, we do special one-off offerings, like we're doing a bunch for Christmas, and we did a bunch for Thanksgiving. And so there are opportunities if you sign up at dryfarmwines.com at our website for our mail list. If you don't want to subscribe, you'll then get access to offers. But most of our customers are regular wine drinkers.
Yep.
And they want to be on a subscription because it just works out better for them.
It's way,
And it's super simple. And many of them order boxes in between their shipments.
Depending on how much.
We will allow our members to order anything they want, anytime they want. But unless you're a subscriber, we don't do single bottle sales or anything like that.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
It's just not. Well, we have a community of people who are deeply committed to their health, and deeply committed to nutritional programming, and committed to drinking a lot of wine. So, I mean, our customers, our family, our community are wine drinkers. So they don't. That's just sort of. We had to decide who we were going to be, and that's just who we are.
No, that's fantastic.
So anyway, that's how we work.
Well, you take, like in a lot of things in nutrition, you are taking the guesswork out of it. And that's the hardest thing for people, for me, for people listening, is trying to figure out, what to eat, what to drink. For the wine, you got it covered in the wine. You've done the research. You've got the right, you're the expert. So that's fascinating. I love the model. I love the service. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll be checking it. I mean, I've been looking at it, but now I get the real inside scoop. So I'm excited about this.
Awesome.
This is good.
Awesome.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I know you're traveling, you're busy, you're doing a lot of things, and you're on the road. And I thank you so much for taking the time. I know I was really excited about this because I love wine. And now I really appreciate the information you've given us, the insights you've given us. And I thank you for the service you're giving. And I just hope it just continues to grow like mad, because, like you said, you're beating that white devil, that sugar addiction for people. I think it's an amazing health benefit for people. So thank you so much, Todd.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you having me on today. And just in closing, how to contact me or us if your audience is interested in what we're doing. So it's very simple. Dry Farm Wines with an S.com. Dryfarmwines with an S.com is our website, and that tells our whole story. All of our social media is Dry Farm Wines. And if anybody wants to contact me, it's Todd, Todd, at dryfarmwines.com. In closing, I want to leave your listeners with just one more idea.
Yeah, perfect.
The thing I'm most excited about in the world today is the expanding consciousness movement and meditation.
Right.
And I think meditate as an extreme biohacker, and I practice many biohacking regimens, as you know, Wim Hof breathing, ketogenic diet, cold thermogenesis. I'm just most excited. I think we have the opportunity through connected consciousness, driven by meditation, to save our species and the planet. So I think of all the biohacking practices that I have, meditation is the single most important.
Wow.
It's super powerful. So for I know lots of people have tried and quit because they can't stop thinking. And that's the reason we call it a practice.
That's right.
It's super powerful, and I hope that your listeners will consider expanding their meditation practice or trying meditation again if they haven't been successful in the past. And finally, I want to say thank you. I love all of you. Spread love through the world. Touch your friends. Tell them you love them during this holiday season. And thank you again for having me on your show.
Thank you. This was fantastic. You have a great day, Todd.
All right. Thanks, buddy.